The rain pounded against the wooden shingles like a cavalry charge, each droplet a tiny soldier in an endless assault that had persisted for 3 days without mercy. Lucy Norwood stared in disbelief as the water crept higher up the walls of her father's general store, swallowing the town of Enid, Oklahoma, inch by merciless inch. Now, stranded on the pitched roof with nothing but the clothes on her back and her father's pocket watch clutched in her trembling hand, she wondered if she would live to see her 20th birthday. It was the spring of 1889, barely a month after the land run had brought hopeful settlers flooding into the territory. Lucy and her father had been among the first to stake their claim in Enid, building a modest general store to supply the needs of the budding community. Her father had left 3 days ago to secure more inventory from Oklahoma City, promising to return before the storm hit. Now the storm had transformed into a biblical deluge, and there was no sign of him. The murky water churned below her, carrying debris from destroyed homesteads' furniture, wagon wheels, and the occasional drowned livestock. Lucy shivered despite the warm April air, her soaked cotton dress clinging uncomfortably to her skin. The water had risen so quickly in the night that she'd barely managed to scramble through the upstairs window and onto the roof before the second floor began to flood. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sound different from the constant drumming of rain hoofbeats, impossibly cutting through the water. Lucy squinted through the downpour, hardly believing her eyes as a figure on horseback emerged from the swirling waters, moving with determined purpose toward her precarious perch. The rider navigated the floodwaters with extraordinary skill, guiding his chestnut mare through the current as if they'd been born for such perilous conditions. As he drew closer, Lucy could make out a broad-shouldered man in a dripping leather duster, his hat pulled low against the driving rain. "Hold on there, miss," he called, his voice carrying clearly despite the storm's fury. "I'm coming to get you." Lucy had never been one for dramatic displays, but the sight of another human being after hours of solitary terror brought tears to her eyes that mingled with the raindrops on her cheeks. She watched in awe as the stranger maneuvered his horse alongside the building, rising slightly in his stirrups to close the distance between them. "Name's Wade Yancy," he said, extending a gloved hand toward her. "I reckon you could use a ride to higher ground." Lucy hesitated only briefly before grasping his hand. "Lucy Norwood," she replied, her voice barely audible above the rain. "My father's store everything we have. Won't do you much good if you're not alive to run it," Wade interrupted firmly. "Come on now, this roof won't hold forever with the foundation washing out." As if to emphasize his point, the building shifted slightly beneath her, wood groaning in protest. Lucy needed no further convincing. With surprising strength, Wade pulled her down onto his horse, positioning her in front of him in the saddle. His arms encircled her as he took the reins, creating a secure cage that felt impossibly safe amid the chaos. "Hold tight," he instructed, his breath warm against her ear. "Penny here knows what she's doing, but the current's tricky." Lucy nodded, clutching the saddle horn as the horse Penny turned away from the building and began picking her way through the floodwaters. The water reached halfway up the mare's chest, but the animal moved with confidence under Wade's guidance. "Where are we going?" Lucy asked, raising her voice to be heard over the storm. "Ridge about 2 miles north of town," Wade replied. "Most folks who made it out are gathering there. The railroad embankment's keeping the water back for now." Lucy tried not to think about the "most folks" part of his statement, or what it implied about those who hadn't made it out. Instead, she focused on the rhythmic movement of the horse beneath her and the solid presence of the man behind her. For someone who had appeared from nowhere, Wade Yancy inspired a strange sense of trust. They rode in silence for a time, the horse navigating carefully around debris and deeper water. When they reached what had once been the main street, Lucy gasped. Enid had transformed into a lake, with only the tops of buildings visible above the waterline. The church steeple rose like a strange island, its bell occasionally tolling dolefully as the water rocked it. "It's all gone," she whispered, the full impact of the disaster finally hitting her. Wade's arm tightened slightly around her waist. "Buildings can be rebuilt," he said, his voice gentler than before. "It's the people that matter." Lucy thought of her father, wondering if he'd been caught on the road when the rains came. She'd never felt more alone in her life, yet paradoxically more connected to this stranger who had risked his life to save hers. "Thank you," she said simply, unable to articulate the depth of her gratitude. "Don't thank me yet," Wade responded. "We've still got a ways to go." As they continued their journey, the rain began to ease slightly, though the water showed no signs of receding. Lucy found herself studying Wade's hands on the rain's strong, capable hands with calluses that spoke of hard work. Not the soft hands of a store clerk or a banker, but the hands of a man who made his living outdoors. "Are you a rancher?" she asked, seeking distraction from their dire circumstances. "Of sorts," he replied with a slight chuckle. "Got a small spread about 10 miles west of here. Nothing fancy, but it's mine, or was before this flood. Doubt my cattle fared too well." "I'm sorry," Lucy said, feeling a pang of sympathy. "You lost everything too, and yet you're out here rescuing strangers." Wade was silent for a moment before responding. "Seemed like the right thing to do. Saw the floodwaters rising and got to higher ground with my horse, then started looking for folks who couldn't get out on their own." "How many others have you rescued?" Lucy asked. "You're the 7th, he said matter-of-factly, "but the first I found on a rooftop." Something about his straightforward heroism touched Lucy deeply. In the year since her mother had passed from tuberculosis, she'd seen little enough of basic human decency in the world. Her father had moved them west, seeking a fresh start, but the rough frontier seemed to bring out the worst in many people. Wade Yancy appeared to be an exception to that rule. The terrain began to rise slightly, and Lucy felt a surge of hope as Penny's hooves found more solid footing. Soon they were only knee-deep in water rather than chest-deep, and she could see the outline of the railroad embankment ahead, a dark line against the gray sky. Figures moved along it, and as they drew closer, Lucy could make out tents and makeshift shelters. "That's our destination," Wade said. "Not exactly the Palmer House Hotel, but it's dry." As they approached, people began to notice their arrival. Several men waded out to meet them, helping Lucy down from the horse while offering words of welcome and relief. One woman wrapped a relatively dry blanket around Lucy's shoulders, leading her toward a large canvas tent where a small stove provided precious warmth. Lucy turned back to thank Wade, but he had already turned his horse around, preparing to head back into the floodwaters. "Wait," she called. "Where are you going?" He looked back, rainwater streaming from the brim of his hat. "Still folks out there who need help, Miss Norwood. Can't stop now." "But you've done enough," Lucy protested, inexplicably disturbed by the thought of him returning to danger. "Not while there's still daylight," he said with a slight tip of his hat. "I'll be back by nightfall. You get warm and get some rest." Before Lucy could argue further, Wade urged Penny forward, and horse and rider disappeared back into the curtain of rain. Lucy stared after him, the strange ache in her chest having nothing to do with her near-drowning experience. Inside the tent, Lucy found herself surrounded by other refugees from Enid and nearby homesteads. Some she recognized as regular customers from her father's store, others were strangers. All wore the same shocked expression, the disbelieving stare of people whose lives had been upended in the space of hours. "Lucy Norwood, isn't it?" A middle-aged woman approached, offering a tin cup of hot coffee. "I'm Martha Weaver. My husband and I farm just outside town." Lucy accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her cold fingers around the warm metal. "Yes, madam. I remember you from the store," Martha nodded. "That cowboy who brought you in, he's been running rescue missions all day. Brought in the Hendersons and their 3 little ones earlier, and old Dr. Phillips too." "Do you know him?" Lucy asked, trying to keep her tone casual. "Wade Yancy. Not well. Keeps to himself mostly. Has a small cattle operation west of town. Came here during the land run like the rest of us." Martha lowered her voice slightly. "They say he was a Texas Ranger before that, but had some kind of trouble. Never talks about it himself." Lucy sipped her coffee, contemplating this information. A former Texas Ranger would certainly have the skills needed to navigate dangerous conditions and rescue people. It explained his competence and calm in the face of disaster. "Have you seen my father?" Lucy asked, changing the subject. "Thomas Norwood. He went to Oklahoma City for supplies a few days ago." Martha's expression grew sympathetic. "I'm sorry, dear, I haven't. But there are folks arriving all the time, and if he was in Oklahoma City, he might have been spared the worst of it." Lucy nodded, clinging to that hope. She spent the remainder of the afternoon helping where she could, distributing food, organizing blankets, and comforting children separated from parents. The work kept her hands busy and her mind from dwelling too much on all she had lost or on the man who had saved her life. As dusk approached, Lucy found herself continually glancing toward the floodwaters, watching for Wade's return. The rain had finally stopped, though the water showed no signs of receding quickly. Other rescuers had returned, farmers with boats, men on horseback, but there was no sign of Wade Yancy. "He'll be back," Martha said, noticing Lucy's vigilance. "That one keeps his word." Just when the last light was fading from the sky, a familiar figure on horseback emerged from the gathering darkness. Wade looked exhausted, his shoulders slumped slightly in the saddle. His horse moved slowly, clearly tired from the day's exertions. Behind him rode a teenage boy on a mule, clutching an infant in his arms. Lucy moved forward without thinking, reaching Wade just as he dismounted. He nearly stumbled, catching himself on the saddle. "You're hurt," she said, noticing how he favored his right leg. "Just a scrape," he dismissed, though his grimace belied his words. "Building collapsed as we were getting the baby out. Nothing serious." Lucy didn't believe him for a moment. "Let me help you," she insisted, sliding her shoulder under his arm for support. "You've done enough for one day." To her surprise, Wade didn't argue, allowing her to help him toward the medical tent where a volunteer nurse had set up a makeshift infirmary. His nearness sent an unexpected flutter through Lucy's stomach, which she attributed to the day's stress and exhaustion. The nurse, a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Berkeley, confirmed Lucy's suspicions after examining Wade's leg. "That's not just a scrape, Mr. Yancy. You've got a nasty gash that needs stitching, and I'd wager you've bruised the bone as well." She prepared her needle and thread with efficiency. "You won't be riding anywhere for a few days at least." Wade looked ready to protest, but caught Lucy's stern glance and subsided. "Guess Penny could use the rest anyway," he conceded. Lucy stayed while Mrs. Berkeley cleaned and stitched the wound, a jagged 6-inch gash running along Wade's calf. He endured the painful procedure without complaint, though Lucy noticed the tension in his jaw and the whiteness of his knuckles as he gripped the edge of the cot. "There," Mrs. Berkeley said, tying off the last stitch. "Keep it clean and stay off it as much as possible for at least 3 days. I'll check it tomorrow for signs of infection." When she had gone to tend another patient, Lucy sat beside Wade's cot. "How many more did you rescue after you left me here?" "4," he answered, shifting to a more comfortable position. "Family holed up in their barn loft, and the boy with the baby you saw. Parents didn't make it." The sadness in his voice was palpable. Lucy touched his hand briefly. "You can't save everyone." "I know that," he said, his blue eyes meeting hers. "Doesn't make it any easier." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection born of shared tragedy and resilience. Lucy felt herself drawn to this quiet, determined man who put others' needs before his own. "You should get some rest," she said, pulling her hand away reluctantly. "I'll bring you something to eat." Wade caught her wrist gently before she could stand. "Thank you, Lucy," he said softly, "for helping me when I needed it." The way he said her name like it was something precious sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the stove's heat. "You'd have done the same for me," she replied. "In fact, you already did." Later, as the camp settled for the night, Lucy found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. She lay on her borrowed blanket, listening to the soft breathing of those around her and the occasional distant crash as weakened structures succumbed to the floodwaters. Her thoughts kept returning to Wade Yancy and the strange twist of fate that had brought him into her life on this most terrible of days. Morning brought weak sunshine and the first real assessment of the disaster. From the vantage point of the railroad embankment, Lucy could see that much of Enid remained underwater, though the levels had dropped slightly overnight. Teams of men were already organizing salvage operations for when the waters receded further. Wade, despite Mrs. Berkeley's instructions, was up and moving about with the aid of a makeshift crutch, conferring with other men about rescue and recovery plans. Lucy watched him from a distance, noting how others deferred to his judgment despite his newcomer status in the community. Leadership, it seemed, was as natural to him as breathing. "Miss Norwood," a young boy tugged at her sleeve, "there's someone asking for you at the north end of camp." Lucy's heart leaped. "My father," the boy shrugged. "Dunno, just said to fetch Lucy Norwood." Lucy hurried as fast as the muddy ground would allow, hope blooming in her chest. When she reached the northern perimeter, she saw a wagon being unloaded supplies from Oklahoma City, apparently having made it through on the higher ground along the railroad tracks. And there, directing the unloading, was Thomas Norwood. "Papa," Lucy cried, rushing toward him. Her father turned at her voice, his weathered face breaking into a relieved smile as he caught her in a fierce embrace. "Lucy, thank God," he murmured into her hair. "When I saw the flooding, I feared the worst. The store is gone," Lucy told him, pulling back to look at his face. "Everything is underwater." Thomas nodded gravely. "I suspected as much when we passed through town, but you're safe, that's what matters." He looked around at the refugee camp. "How did you escape the flood?" Lucy explained about being trapped on the roof and Wade's dramatic rescue. As she spoke, she noticed her father's expression change subtly. "Wade Yancy, you say?" he asked when she had finished. "You know him?" Lucy asked, surprised. Thomas stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "Know of him. He had some trouble down in Texas, killed a man from what I heard." "He was a ranger," Lucy defended, inexplicably bothered by her father's tone. "I'm sure if he killed someone it was justified." "Perhaps," her father conceded. "In any case, I owe the man my gratitude for saving you." He squeezed her shoulder. "Now, help me distribute these supplies. I managed to convince some merchants in Oklahoma City to donate food and blankets when they heard about the flooding." Lucy spent the morning helping her father organize relief efforts, but her mind kept wandering to Wade and what her father had said about him. By midday, she could stand it no longer and sought Wade out, finding him seated on a crate near the medical tent, his injured leg stretched out before him. "I heard your father made it back," he said as she approached. "You must be relieved." "I am," Lucy confirmed, sitting beside him. "He brought supplies from Oklahoma City. The railroad is sending more tomorrow." Wade nodded. "Good news, folks will need plenty to rebuild." Lucy hesitated, unsure how to broach the subject on her mind. Wade seemed to sense her discomfort. "Something else on your mind, Miss Norwood?" "My father mentioned he'd heard of you," she said carefully. "Something about trouble in Texas." Wade's expression remained neutral, but Lucy noticed a slight tightening around his eyes. "Did he now? And what exactly did Thomas Norwood have to say about me?" "That you killed a man," Lucy said bluntly, deciding directness was the best approach. Wade was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant floodwaters. "I did," he finally admitted. "More than one, in fact, during my time as a ranger." He turned to look at her directly. "Does that frighten you, should it?" Lucy countered. A faint smile touched his lips. "No," he said. "The men I killed deserved killing, outlaws who'd murdered innocent folks. One was a cattle baron's son who thought his daddy's money put him above the law. Shot a farmer over a boundary dispute, then shot the farmer's wife when she came running." His voice hardened. "The baron had the local sheriff in his pocket, so the rangers were called in. When we went to arrest the son, he drew on us." "You were doing your job," Lucy said softly. "I was," Wade agreed. "But the baron had powerful friends." Suddenly there were questions about whether his son really drew first. Witnesses changed their stories. I was asked to resign my commission. "That's not fair," Lucy protested. "Life rarely is, Miss Norwood," Wade said with a shrug. "I decided to make a fresh start here in Oklahoma Territory. Bought some cattle, claimed some land. Was doing all right until this flood." He gestured at the devastation around them. "We all have to start over now," Lucy said. After a brief hesitation, she added, "And I wish you'd call me Lucy. After pulling me off a roof in a flood, I think we're past formalities." That earned her a genuine smile that transformed his face, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "Lucy it is, then." Over the next several days, as the floodwaters gradually receded, Lucy found herself spending more and more time in Wade's company. Despite Mrs. Berkeley's admonitions, he refused to remain idle, coordinating recovery efforts from the camp and eventually venturing into town as it became accessible. Lucy often accompanied him, ostensibly to help but increasingly because she enjoyed his company. Her father noticed, of course. One evening as they sat by a campfire, Thomas broached the subject. "You've been spending a lot of time with Yancy," he observed, keeping his tone neutral. "He's a good man," Lucy replied, meeting her father's gaze steadily. "He saved countless lives since the flood, including mine," Thomas sighed. "I don't dispute that, Lucy, and I'm grateful to him, but—" He hesitated. "A man with his past isn't the sort of person I envisioned for you." "What sort did you envision?" Lucy asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. "Someone like Edwin Porter back in Missouri, who never did a day's hard work in his life and expected me to simper and agree with everything he said." "Edwin was from a good family," her father protested. "Edwin was a bore," Lucy countered. "Besides, I'm not saying I have any designs on Wade Yancy. We're friends, that's all. He's been kind to me during a difficult time." Thomas didn't look convinced, but he let the matter drop. "The waters receded enough that we can assess the store tomorrow. See what can be salvaged." Lucy nodded, grateful for the change of subject. "Do you think we'll rebuild in the same location?" "I'm not sure," her father admitted. "This flood has me thinking maybe we should consider a spot on higher ground." The next morning, Lucy and her father made their way to what remained of Norwood's general store. The sight was disheartening. Though the building still stood, the floodwaters had damaged the foundation, and everything inside was either destroyed by water or caked in thick, foul-smelling mud. Lucy waded through what had once been the store's main room, now a sodden mess of ruined goods and collapsed shelving. She picked up a waterlogged ledger, the ink running in blue streaks down the pages. "All our records," she said despondently. Her father put an arm around her shoulders. "We'll start fresh," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "The important thing is we're both alive." A voice from the doorway made them both turn. Thomas Norwood, a well-dressed man, stood there, picking his way carefully through the debris. "Hollis Montgomery," he introduced himself, extending a hand to Thomas. "I represent the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad." Thomas shook the offered hand cautiously. "What can I do for you, Mr. Montgomery?" "Actually, it's what I can do for you," Montgomery replied with a practiced smile. "The railroad is investing in the rebuilding of Enid. We see great potential here, despite this unfortunate flooding. I'm authorized to make purchase offers on damaged properties at fair market value, of course." Lucy watched her father's expression shift from wariness to interest. "And what would the railroad want with a damaged general store?" Montgomery spread his hands. "We're planning a larger depot and supporting businesses. Your location is ideal, close to the tracks but with good street frontage. We'd demolish what's left of the building, of course." Thomas looked thoughtful. "How much?" As Montgomery named a figure, Lucy saw her father's eyebrows rise. It was generous, more than the business and property had been worth before the flood. "I'll need time to think about it," Thomas said cautiously. "Of course," Montgomery agreed. "But I should mention that I'm making similar offers throughout town. Those who decide quickly will benefit most." He handed Thomas a card. "I'm staying at the tent hotel set up near the depot. You can find me there when you've made your decision." After Montgomery left, Lucy turned to her father. "Are you considering it?" Thomas pocketed the card. "It would be foolish not to. This place would take months and considerable investment to rebuild. The railroad's offer would give us enough to start fresh somewhere else, maybe back east where it's more settled." "Back east?" Lucy repeated, a sudden coldness gripping her heart. "But we came west for a new beginning. You said there were more opportunities here." "That was before a flood destroyed everything we've built," her father reminded her gently. "Maybe it's a sign we should reconsider." Lucy wanted to argue further but was interrupted by Wade's arrival. He limped slightly as he entered the store, his injured leg clearly still healing. "Thought I'd find you here," he said, nodding to both Norwoods. "How bad is it?" "Total loss," Thomas said grimly. "But the railroad's offering to buy the property." Wade's expression darkened. "Montgomery been by, has he? He's been making the rounds all morning." "You don't approve?" Thomas asked, noting Wade's tone. "The railroad's buying up half the town for pennies on the dollar," Wade replied. "Folks are desperate after the flood, willing to sell at any price. In 6 months, these properties will be worth 3 times what they're paying." "He offered us a fair price," Thomas defended. "More than fair considering the damage," Wade shrugged. "It's your business, Mr. Norwood." "Just thought you should know what's happening. The railroads had their eye on expanding in Enid for months. This flood just made it easier for them to buy out reluctant property owners." Thomas's expression hardened slightly. "I appreciate your concern for our financial well-being, Mr. Yancy, but I've been in business longer than you've been alive. I can recognize a good deal when I see one." The tension between the two men was palpable. Lucy stepped in quickly. "Thank you for checking on us, Wade." "We're still assessing the damage." Wade nodded, seeming to understand her attempt to defuse the situation. "If you need help salvaging anything, just ask. I've got some men clearing debris from the main street who could lend a hand." After he had gone, Thomas turned to Lucy with a frown. "That young man seems to have appointed himself your protector." "He's just being kind," Lucy said defensively. He's being presumptuous, her father corrected. Questioning my business decisions, and the way he looks at you, how does he look at me? Lucy interrupted, heat rising in her cheeks. Thomas sighed. Like a man who's got more on his mind than friendship. He put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Lucy, I know you're grateful to him for saving your life. That's natural, but gratitude can sometimes be mistaken for deeper feelings. I know the difference, Lucy said quietly, though in truth, she wasn't entirely certain of her feelings for Wade Yancy. The events of the past week had thrown them together in extraordinary circumstances. Was what she felt merely the product of that intensity, or something more lasting? Just be careful, her father advised. Now, let's see what we can salvage from the storeroom. They spent the remainder of the day sorting through the wreckage, setting aside the few items that might be cleaned and resold. By evening, they had a pathetically small pile of salvageable goods, and a growing certainty that the business was beyond saving. As they made their way back to the camp, they encountered Wade again, deep in conversation with a group of men near what had been the town square. He broke away when he saw them approaching. Any luck? He asked. Very little, Thomas admitted. The water ruined most of our inventory. Wade nodded sympathetically. That's been the story all over town. Listen, there's a meeting tonight at the camp. Town council's gathering whoever's left to discuss rebuilding plans. You might want to attend before making any decisions about selling. Thomas looked skeptical but agreed. We'll be there. The meeting was held in the largest tent, packed with survivors eager to discuss Enid's future. The mayor, or what remained of the town's leadership, outlined preliminary plans for rebuilding, focusing on flood prevention measures and improved infrastructure. When the railroad's purchase offers were mentioned, heated debate erupted. Some favored selling and moving on. Others were determined to rebuild despite the challenges. Wade was among the most vocal advocates for staying and reconstructing the town independently. The railroad's not interested in what's best for Enid, he argued passionately. They want to control the town, reshape it to serve their interests. If we sell out now, we lose the community we've started to build. His words resonated with many, including Lucy. She glanced at her father, trying to gauge his reaction. Thomas looked thoughtful but unconvinced. After the meeting, they walked back to their tent in silence. Finally, Thomas spoke. Yancy makes some good points, but he's young and idealistic. The practical reality is that rebuilding without the railroad's investment will be much harder. So you're still considering selling? Lucy asked. I think it might be for the best, her father said. For both of us. Lucy stopped walking. What if I don't want to leave? Thomas turned to her, surprise evident on his face. Lucy, there's nothing left for us here. The store is destroyed. We'd be starting from nothing. We'd be starting from nothing anywhere we go, she pointed out. At least here we know people. We're part of something. Is this about the town or about Wade Yancy? Her father asked directly. Lucy felt her face flush. That's not fair, isn't it? You've hardly taken your eyes off him since he pulled you from that roof. Thomas's voice softened. Lucy, I understand he seems heroic right now, but you barely know him. I know enough, Lucy insisted. I know he risked his life repeatedly to save others. I know he's honest and hardworking and cares about this community. And I know he killed a man and was forced to leave Texas, her father countered. Whatever the circumstances, that's not something to take lightly. They had reached their tent, and Lucy paused outside. I'm going for a walk, she said, needing space to think. I won't go far. Before her father could protest, she turned and headed toward the edge of the camp. The night was clear, stars shining brilliantly in the Oklahoma sky. The air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke from the camp's fires. Lucy found a fallen log near the perimeter and sat, her thoughts in turmoil. She'd come to Oklahoma Territory with her father seeking a new beginning after her mother's death. Enid had started to feel like home in the brief time they'd been there. The flood had changed everything, but did it have to mean abandoning the life they'd begun to build? And then there was Wade. Lucy couldn't deny the attraction she felt toward him. It wasn't just gratitude for saving her life, though that had certainly been the beginning. In the days since, she'd come to admire his strength, his integrity, and his unwavering commitment to helping others. The way her heart quickened when he was near couldn't be dismissed as mere appreciation. "Mind if I join you?" The voice startled her from her thoughts. Wade stood a few feet away, his figure outlined in the moonlight. Lucy nodded and he sat beside her on the log, leaving a respectful distance between them. "Your father's not too fond of me," he observed, a hint of wry humor in his voice. Lucy couldn't help but smile. "Is it that obvious?" "He looks at me like I might steal the silver if he turns his back," Wade said. "Though I suppose from his perspective I might be trying to steal something more valuable." The implication hung in the air between them. Lucy felt her pulse quicken. "And are you?" she asked softly. Wade turned to face her, his expression serious in the dim light. "I wouldn't call it stealing. Can't steal what's freely given," he paused. "If it were given, that is." Lucy's mouth went dry. "Wade, I know it's too soon," he interrupted. "We've known each other barely a week, and in unusual circumstances at that. Your father's right to be cautious." He ran a hand through his hair. "But I can't deny what I feel when I'm with you, Lucy, and I hope you might feel something too." The honesty in his voice moved her deeply. Lucy took a breath, deciding that truth deserved truth in return. "I do feel something," she admitted. "But my father's talking about selling to the railroad and moving back east. He thinks there's nothing left for us here." Wade was quiet for a moment. "And what do you think?" "I think I'm not ready to leave," Lucy said. "Not Enid and not—" She hesitated, then finished softly, "not you." Wade reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers. "Then don't." "It's not that simple," Lucy sighed. "My father is all the family I have. I can't just defy his wishes." "You're a grown woman," Wade pointed out gently, "capable of making your own choices." "Even if that's true, I have no way to support myself if I stayed," Lucy argued. "The store is destroyed. I have no home, no income." Wade squeezed her hand. "People are rebuilding. There will be opportunities." "And you wouldn't be alone." His eyes held hers. "I'd be here." The promise in those simple words made Lucy's heart swell. Before she could respond, voices called her name from the direction of the camp. "Your father's looking for you," Wade said, releasing her hand reluctantly. "You should go." Lucy stood, torn between staying and returning to camp. "We're not finished with this conversation," she told him. Wade smiled. "I certainly hope not." Lucy returned to find her father pacing anxiously outside their tent. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "It's not safe to wander off alone." "I wasn't alone," Lucy said, deciding honesty was best. "I was talking with Wade." Thomas's expression tightened. "I see." "No, I don't think you do," Lucy said with newfound determination. "Wade believes in Enid's future. He's staying to help rebuild, and I'm considering doing the same." "Lucy, be reasonable," her father pleaded. "What would you do here without the store? How would you live?" "I'd find a way," she insisted. "People need all sorts of help rebuilding. I could teach, I have the education for it, or work in one of the new businesses that will open." Thomas looked at his daughter as if seeing her in a new light. "You're serious about this?" "I am," Lucy confirmed. "I understand if you want to sell and move on, but I'm asking you to at least consider staying, giving Enid another chance." Her father was silent for a long moment. "This is about Yancy, isn't it?" "Not entirely," Lucy said honestly. "But yes, he's part of it. I care for him, Papa, and I think he cares for me." Thomas sighed heavily. You've always had your mother's stubborn streak. Let me think on it overnight, no decisions until morning. Lucy nodded, knowing it was the best she could hope for. Thank you, Papa. The next morning brought news that would change everything. A rider arrived from Wade's ranch with word that, while the main house had sustained damage, most of his cattle had survived by finding high ground. Furthermore, the railroad was offering to buy his land at a premium, as they planned to run a spur line through that area. Wade sought out Lucy as soon as he heard. My foreman saved most of the herd, he told her, excitement evident in his voice. And the railroad offer would give me enough to buy new land farther from the floodplain and rebuild properly. That's wonderful news, Lucy said sincerely. Will you accept their offer? I'm considering it, Wade admitted. Not because I'm giving up on Enid, but because it might be a better position from which to help rebuild. With that money, I could invest in the town, maybe even open a business. Lucy's mind raced with possibilities. What sort of business? I've been thinking about that, Wade said. Enid will need supplies for rebuilding: lumber, tools, hardware, the kind of things your father's store provided but focused more on construction needs. The idea struck Lucy forcefully. A partnership, she said suddenly. What if my father used the railroad's money to open a new store on higher ground focusing on the goods people will need to rebuild? You could invest from your land sale. Wade considered this, a slow smile spreading across his face. It could work, he said. Your father knows the mercantile business and I know ranching and construction. Between us, we'd have the knowledge and capital to create something solid. We need to talk to him, Lucy said, excitement building. This might be the solution that works for everyone. They found Thomas at the remnants of the general store, making a final inventory of salvageable goods. He listened skeptically as they outlined their proposal, but Lucy could see he was intrigued despite himself. It has potential, he acknowledged when they finished. But a partnership requires trust, Mr. Yancy. I'm not sure we've established that between us. Fair enough, Wade conceded. But consider this. The railroad wants our properties because they know Enid will rebuild and flourish. They're betting on the town's future. Shouldn't we do the same? Thomas studied the younger man thoughtfully. And what about your intentions toward my daughter? Are they as honorable as your business proposal? Wade met his gaze steadily. Completely honorable, sir. I won't pretend I don't care for Lucy. I do deeply. But I respect her enough to give her time to know her own mind. The business partnership stands on its own merits, regardless of personal feelings. Lucy held her breath, watching her father's face. After what seemed an eternity, Thomas extended his hand to Wade. We'll try this partnership on a provisional basis, he said. 3 months. If it works out, we'll formalize it. If not, we each take our investment and go our separate ways. Agreed, Wade said, shaking his hand firmly. Lucy could hardly contain her joy. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a beginning, a chance to rebuild both the town and her life on her own terms. The weeks that followed were among the busiest of Lucy's life. The flood waters receded completely, leaving behind a mud-caked town in need of massive reconstruction. Wade and Thomas finalized their deals with the railroad, securing enough capital to purchase a plot on the town's highest ground and begin construction of a new store. Norwood and Yancy Mercantile. Lucy threw herself into the work, helping design the new store, ordering inventory, and assisting with the actual construction alongside Wade. Her father watched their growing closeness with diminishing concern as he came to appreciate Wade's business acumen and work ethic. By midsummer, the new store was ready to open. Enid itself was transforming. Many buildings had been rebuilt, others were in progress, and the railroad's expanded depot brought increased traffic and commerce to the recovering town. The partnership had proved successful beyond anyone's expectations, with the store becoming a centerpiece of the rebuilding effort. On the evening before the grand opening, Lucy and Wade stood on the store's new porch, looking out at the town, as the setting sun bathed everything in golden light. "Hard to believe this is the same place that was underwater 3 months ago," Wade remarked, his shoulder brushing against Lucy's. "People are resilient," Lucy said, "when they have something to believe in." Wade turned to face her. "And what do you believe in, Lucy Norwood?" Lucy met his gaze steadily. "Second chances, new beginnings," she smiled. "Stubborn cowboys who rescue damsels from rooftops." Wade laughed softly. "Best decision I ever made riding through that flood." "For both of us," Lucy agreed, her voice softening. Wade took her hands in his. "Your father's provisional partnership period ends tomorrow," he said. "He told me this afternoon he intends to make it permanent." "That's wonderful news," Lucy said, though she suspected there was more. "There's something else I want to make permanent," Wade continued, his voice suddenly serious. "If you're willing." Lucy's heart began to race as Wade dropped to one knee, still holding her hands in his. "Lucy Norwood, these past months have been the most challenging and rewarding of my life. The flood that nearly destroyed this town brought you into my life, and I thank God for it every day. I love you, your strength, your determination, your heart. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Lucy's eyes. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Wade Yancy, I will marry you." Wade stood and pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers in a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they finally parted, Lucy rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Does my father know you were planning this?" she asked. Wade chuckled. "Who do you think helped me pick out the ring?" He reached into his pocket and produced a simple gold band with a small diamond. "It's not fancy, it's perfect," Lucy interrupted, extending her hand so he could slide it onto her finger. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. From disaster had come unexpected blessing, a partnership, a love, and a future neither could have imagined when flood waters threatened to wash everything away. "I was thinking," Wade said after a while, "we might build our house on that rise just outside of town, high enough to never worry about flooding." "With a good view of the plains," Lucy added, imagining it. "And enough room for children," Wade suggested, a question in his voice. Lucy smiled up at him. "At least 3, she said decisively. "Maybe more." Wade's answering smile was radiant. "I love you, Lucy Norwood." "Soon to be Lucy Yancy," she reminded him. "The best sound I've ever heard," Wade murmured, bending to kiss her once more. The following morning, Norwood and Yancy Mercantile opened its doors to the citizens of Enid. The store was filled with light and promise, its shelves stocked with everything the rebuilding town needed. Thomas Norwood beamed with pride as he cut the ribbon, officially opening the establishment that represented not just his own second chance, but his daughter's happiness. As customers flooded in, Lucy caught Wade's eye across the crowded store. In that moment, surrounded by the town they had helped rebuild, the future stretched before them bright, promising, and wholly their own. 5 years later, Lucy stood on the porch of their hilltop home, watching as Wade taught their 4-year-old son Thomas how to ride his first pony. Their 2-year-old daughter Sarah played nearby, constructing elaborate towers with wooden blocks. Inside, their newborn son James slept peacefully in his cradle. The town of Enid spread out below them, now a thriving community twice the size it had been before the flood. The railroad had indeed brought prosperity, but thanks in part to Wade and Thomas's influence. The town had maintained its independent character rather than becoming merely a railroad outpost. Norwood and Yancy Mercantile had expanded to include a second location in a neighboring town, and Wade had managed to rebuild his cattle operation on higher ground while remaining an active partner in the store. Thomas had recently begun talking about retirement, pleased that the business would remain in family hands. As Wade lifted Thomas Jr. from the pony and sent him running toward his mother, Lucy reflected on the strange turns life could take. A devastating flood that had seemed like the end of everything had instead been the beginning, washing away one life to make room for another, better one. Wade joined her on the porch, wrapping an arm around her waist as they watched their children play. "Happy?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "Completely," Lucy replied, leaning into his embrace. The gold wedding band on her finger caught the sunlight, a tangible symbol of the promises they'd made and kept. From the depths of disaster, they had built something beautiful: a family, a business, a life together. The flood that had once threatened to destroy everything had instead delivered Lucy to the rooftop, where Wade found her, beginning a journey neither could have foreseen, but both would always cherish. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the Oklahoma sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Lucy and Wade Yancy stood together, surrounded by the life they'd created, a testament to resilience, courage, and the enduring power of love born in the most unlikely circumstances.